Go ahead, right? Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. David Ajibade with the Brain and Body Foundation, and thank you for joining us today. Hey, I've got lots of rounds of applause. You should see the audience. Crazy. Thank you. So we're going to be talking about keeping your marbles, and specifically, we'll be talking about dementia, specifically Alzheimer's dementia. And I think it's really, really important. I was just talking with one of the participants here. We need to start taking a closer look about how the brain works and how to protect the brain and how to, even more than that, strengthen the brain, because the way things are going, especially now with this pandemic stage, hopefully the pandemic is over, we're going to be seeing a lot of brain issues going forward, not just in the adults, but in the younger ones as well. So it's super important that we really begin to take a closer look about what it takes to keep your brain healthy from early life and throughout life. And if you're an older person, obviously, there's a lot you can still do. Even though they say, Alzheimer's disease starts like two decades, 3 decades before it manifests. Even if you are in the moderate/severe stage of the disease, there's still a lot you can do. Thankfully, with technology and some really smart people, we've been able to find out some key things that can be done. So I'm going to quick start by just saying a little bit about myself, how we got to this spot. And then we'll kind of like go into what it takes, like I said, to nourish and strengthen your brain so you don't fall victim. And if you are already in the quote unquote throes, you would have some tools and some understanding to apply as going forward. So a few things about myself. I guess you kind of figured out I'm not from this part of the world. I actually grew up in Nigeria, and I started practicing as a doctor way back some 20 plus years ago. And my first career was in radiation oncology, and we started treating a lot of cancer patients using radiation, and that was an experience on its own. But I wanted to learn a lot more about the brain and about the body and how the body can repair and fix itself, so that even if it has issues, we'll know what to do about it. So that desire took me to the United States, brought me here about, I think that was 2002. And for a while, I got a master's degree. And for a while, I really started learning all these things about the mind, the body, even spiritual things, and how best to strengthen the human body. And after about 10 years, went back to Nigeria. Before I went back to Nigeria, we did a lot of webinars. That was 2007, 2008. When nobody knew what a webinar was. And during that time, we created a company, my friend and I, a webinar company that's focused on bringing in the best speakers, the best researchers, scientists, bringing in their innovative ways, what they had found out about the brain and the body and how to treat the body. And I got to tell you, that was one of my best experiences because I learned so much. I mean, yes, it was for audiences around the world, but really it was for me because looking back now, I see how that prepared me and to do what we're doing today. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes. So when we got back to Nigeria, we started seeing a lot of problems with kids with brain disorders, everything from cerebral palsy to autism and seizure disorders. And because of our experience working with the webinars and the company over here, we began to look into using solutions like nutrients and importing nutrients in from the US into Nigeria. And we started using those on kids with brain disorders, and the results were fantastic. And after a while, we went to the government to say, hey, listen, we have all these kids with these problems, and nothing much is being done about them. We can help. So after, well, it was a bit of a struggle, but after a while, the government finally agreed, and they gave us full permission to use nutrients, specifically nutrients now, to address and treat kids with these brain disorders. And the results have been fantastic, and we've already documented them. We've published on the NIH website, so you can find it on our website as well. So in the process of helping these kids with these brain disorders, we started having kids coming to us with sickle cell disease. In fact, let me get on and let me put a picture up here. I might as well just start sharing my slides. So here you go. Okay, I have my pointer over here. See my slides? Okay, so you can see my slides. For some reason, it's not moving. So let's see. See. I need to turn it on again.
Did you put this in?
Is that? So yeah.
That's interesting. Maybe it doesn't like being off on the side.
Maybe the other PowerPoint is working, I guess.
Oh, no, it works. It works.
Oh, cool. What was I doing?
It's just, I don't know. You're good.
Okay, thank you. So we kind of talked about our story. Like I said, we went to the government and we said we could help. And we started having so many good results. Kids from all over the city. Abuja is like the Washington, D.C. of the US. So we had people coming all over from the remote area just coming for help, and we helped a lot of people. In the process, we started having people coming to us with our parents bringing their kids with sickle cell disease as a result of strokes, which obviously is a brain disorder. Now think about that. A child 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, having strokes from a condition, from a blood condition. I mean, we usually think about strokes happening to the adults, right? The older people. Not that they deserve it, but kids deserve it even less. And we decided we're going to look into it. It so happens that sickle cell disease is primarily a Black person's condition. We do have Hispanics and Middle Eastern, but it's worse among Blacks. And Nigeria has the most number of Black people on the planet. So obviously Nigeria has the most number of cases of sickle cell disease. We decided to start looking into that and start seeing what can we do to not only prevent these kids from having strokes, but also help them live a more healthy, a more productive, healthier life, so to speak. And we decided to use the same principle that we were applying to the brain disorders. We decided to apply that to sickle cell disease. And once again, lo and behold, the results were fantastic. We found that simply by using specific nutrients in specific ways at specific times, we could get huge improvements. And so again, we went to the government and said, we can help. Why don't we start doing research and hopefully change the way this condition is treated? And that's really why I came to the United States, going on about a year and a half now. I came out to the United States to see how we could collaborate here. There's Johns Hopkins University here. We're looking to see how we can work with hospitals and universities to see what we can do to not only address sickle cell disease, but also brain disorders in remote areas and resource poor area countries and communities like third world nations like ours. So that's why we're here. Eventually I got stuck, COVID-19 does it to everybody. I got stuck here. And so while I was here, we're going to start, I reached out to Angela Taylor. Thank you, Angela, president of the Roland Block Community Center here. And I said, listen, we have a lot of information. Why don't we start hosting seminars, live webinars, and let's share this information that we've learned. Some people may benefit from it. I mean, yes, you have access to the top-notch doctors and hospitals over here, but there are still some people who may want to know what they can do for their health, especially their brain health, and especially during this COVID-19 period. So that's the whole story, how we got started with this. So that said, oh my goodness, I was going to show you some. Okay, so these are some pictures that from when we went to the government and we went to present this at the Ministry of Health and show them what we could do. We took some of the parents with us, and the parents came and they talked. You can see it's clearly this was before COVID, right? I mean, no masks, everybody bunched up. But again, these people were enthralled. They were really impressed because we've been taught, these are all medical professionals, by the way, we've been taught that there's nothing that can be done about certain brain conditions. And so when they saw the results, they were like, wow, this is a whole paradigm shift. And so we're hoping to apply that same principle. That's a picture of a lady who's suffering from sickle cell disease. And of course, another thing I forgot to mention is that we recently won. I host a TV show in Nigeria. It's on the national television station. It's been throughout Africa. We recently won the best award for the top health TV program in Africa. So pretty proud about that, especially since I'm doing it from the US now. It's a lot more difficult to do it when you're not in a studio where you have all the gadgets and all, but that really helps. Okay, let's get into the topic of today. Alzheimer's disease. the one disease condition that cannot be delayed, postponed, or cured. And our question is it? Is that really true? Maybe, or could it possibly be that the way we've been approaching it as doctors, as researchers, as scientists, could it possibly be that our approach could be a problem? Also, think about this. The brain is the most complex, the most delicate, the most sensitive, the most complicated piece of bioequipment in the known universe. So obviously, if there's damage to the brain, it's going to be very, very difficult. But still, does that mean we can't do anything, can't do much about it if there's brain deterioration? As you can see on the left side of the lesson. So yeah, on the right side, see, it's completely reversed to me over here. So on the right side, you have a normal brain. On the left side, you see anybody, anybody who looks at it, a 5-year-old will look at this and see that can easily tell you that the brain on the left is all is not well with the brain on the left, right? So it's clear, there's some clear physical differences that are seen in an individual with Alzheimer's disease. And those things don't start yesterday, for instance, they start over decades, like I've mentioned before. But the question again, even though it's the brain, and even though the brain is so complicated, does it mean that we can't do much about it? Well, before we get into the good news, let's continue with the bad news. There's a lot of things that we're finding out about Alzheimer's disease, but it's really getting bad. Someone in the United States develops Alzheimer's disease every 60 seconds. By 2050, this is going to be almost every half a minute, someone's going to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It is the only top 10 cause of death in the US with no known cure. I'm going to jump to some of the things that are really concerning. 65% of Alzheimer's patients are women. One reason for that is that obviously women tend to live longer than men. Another reason is we're looking at the hormones. Estrogen, which is primarily the female hormone. Men have hormones as well, obviously, have estrogen as well, but estrogen is much higher in women. And they're saying that estrogen has a protective function. And with menopause, there's a drop in estrogen. And so you don't have that protection of the brain. And so that's why they're saying, well, it could be because estrogen is dropping. That's why women tend to have more Alzheimer's disease than men. But is that the only thing? Is it just the age and the fact that estrogen is diminished? Well, we're beginning to find out that there are other factors as well. And we'll probably look into that in the future. Hang on just a minute. This number 7 here is particularly concerning to me because when I saw this, I was like, not again. I mean, it's like, I have a website called Why Blacks Die First. And we've kind of like looking at all the different things that Blacks tend to have it worse. We have it worse with prostate cancer, breast cancer, even autism, believe it or not, and even in cases of injuries from certain kinds of vaccines. Not saying autism is a cause. I'm just saying that the research shows that Black people tend to have it worse in certain conditions. And so when I saw this, I was like, goodness gracious, here's another one. Blacks almost twice as much have Alzheimer's disease as much as white people. So certainly there's going to be a lot of, we need to pay a lot of attention to this because again, Blacks in most parts of the world don't have access to as good healthcare as you all in Baltimore, for instance, have. So we need to look at it. And then I just had this infographic showing the top causes of death. And you see nervous system disorders, including those are brain disorders. It's number 4. But they're saying it's probably number 3 now. And in the coming years, it's probably going to leapfrog 1 or 2 of those. So it's going to be an interesting thing. So obviously it's a problem. What is being done? Let's start with what is the procedure. How is an Alzheimer's disease patient or someone who is suspected of having Alzheimer's disease? What is the management? How are they investigated? What is the workup? Because we need to understand how they're currently being treated and where maybe, just maybe, there might be some holes there. So here's another great quote. Everyone knows a cancer survivor. No one knows an Alzheimer's disease survivor, again, because it's a tough condition. Let That's that picture again. So usually when a patient is suspected of having Alzheimer's disease, there are 2 or 3 main things they do. One is they do the blood tests, they do the CT scan, they do the imaging, they look at they do an extensive mental health cognitive review, and then they come up with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And usually the parents, the caregivers already suspect that this person has this condition. And some of the top drugs obviously are Aricept. That's probably the most common drug for treating Alzheimer's disease. Like I mentioned, you do some imaging studies, some blood studies, you check the thyroid function, and of course, they just tell the caregiver to kind of like watch the person's spending habits, be sure to not let him or her drive by himself, and kind of manage the condition, right? It's kind of like, okay, let's see, how best can we manage the situation and how best can we keep him from hurting himself? On average, the person is going to die within about 7 to 9 years. So, and that is almost a concrete fact that no matter what you do, once it's diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, you've got about 7 years to live. Many times it's less than that. And of course, the latest drug that just came out is a drug called aducanumab. It's a slight improvement on the other drugs. It's a combination of two of the other drugs, but still, it hasn't really promised much. And from what we understand, there was a lot of problems and controversy before they approved it, before FDA approved it. It cost a lot of money, about $56,000 a year. So that's $56,000 that most Nigerians would be able to afford it if they had the condition. So it's not much help. And I always think in terms of people in the remote areas, people who have a condition. Any solution, in my opinion, any solution that is going to work has to be something that we can apply in remote areas. Otherwise, it's not going to help much. And yes, thank God for all the super duper experts and equipment and the testing and the establishments like Johns Hopkins here. But again, we have to find out how to bridge that gap between the top medical care and less than zero medical care, in my opinion. So so when I look at things like this, I'm always thinking, okay, what are the solutions that we can take and bring to places like Nigeria? So here's some more information. That's, ladies and gentlemen, is the standard approach. So you're going to do the testings. You're going to have maybe a therapist. If it's a very severe condition, you bring them into a home where you have nursing staff around the clock. If the caregiver can provide that care, then they do it at home. And of course, you provide the drugs. Again, the drugs haven't really been very promising. So brilliant people like Dr. Dale Bredesen, let's not pick that book, please. Thank you. So brilliant people like Dr. Dale Bredesen have come up with a program called RECODE, and his book is called The End of Alzheimer's Disease. As a matter of fact, I think I have a picture there. There you go. But it's a really good book, and he's a neurologist who has done something some really groundbreaking work when it comes to brain health. And amongst the things, I'm not going to point to everything, but amongst the things that he has found out is that you've got to focus on what is known as the synapses. This is the brain, this picture of the brain, but where the nerves, the neurons meet, one neuron passes information. And this is basically the one on the left. Yes. So this highlighted picture on the left is what you see in the basic subunit of the brain. That's where information is passed. Before you can move your limbs, before you can move your eyes, before you make a thought or have an emotion, there has to be a transmission of impulses from one nerve cell to the next. What Dale and his team found out is that in Alzheimer's disease, there's a process that turns against and destroys this unit right here, the connection between the two nerves. And eventually once that process has started, it spreads throughout the brain and eventually causes the complete destruction. And that picture that you saw earlier. So his theory was, what can we do to prevent the destruction of that unit? And so he's created an entire program called RECODE, which otherwise is called Reversing Cognitive Decline. You can see prevent and reverse cognitive decline. And again, he's a brilliant doctor who has gone through a lot of different things, and he can take you through steps. And among the things he says is that there are about 36 holes or 36 problems, things including insulin resistance, inflammation, toxicity, hormonal reduction or imbalance of hormones, nutrient deficiencies, blood flow, and so on. 36 problems that he looks at. And of course, he does a lot of tests to prove that. Well, I look at all that and I said, that's well and good. What can we do? Can we take back home? And how can we apply it? And to be quite frank with you, we started treating these conditions even before I came over to the US. Because people, obviously, when people see you as being successful and you're having great results, they tend to bring other conditions that you probably hadn't thought about. So among the conditions that they started bringing are that kids or people who had parents who had dementia started bringing them to us, their dementia patients. Some of them weren't even in our location. They would call in or they would ask if we had anything to take care of that. And so we decided to look into it. And basically the same principles that we applied towards brain disorders in children and towards sickle cell disease, we decided we could apply those same principles. And the good thing about it is that if something works in kids, if something is safer in kids, there's a good chance it's going to be safer in adults, and it's a good chance it's going to work in adults. Maybe not as well, because kids tend to respond a lot better to treatment. But nevertheless, we felt that we could apply those same principles in adults. And lo and behold, we began to get some really, really good results. Now, obviously, it's not going to be as complex and as elaborate or comprehensive as Dr. Bedeson's, but we saw that we could see at least a 25% improvement. In some cases, 50, 75% improvement. The children of these patients would call back and say, well, mom isn't roaming around at night, or she's wearing her clothes properly now, or she's not mixing her socks. So I'm putting the different color socks. I mean, all these crazy things and disturbing things they used to observe. So like I said, way back then, we began to see results. But having come here now and having studied under people like Dale Bredesen and other people, we've seen that we've seen a lot of places where we've been able to tweak. So we've actually come up with our own system of addressing brain disorders without having to be concerned about doing the tests, without having to be concerned about maybe side effects or overdose. In the final analysis, my opinion is that you should be able to address a condition by throwing or giving it, strengthening the body or strengthening the area of the body that is affected until you see results without having to worry about side effects or overdose. You can't do that with drugs. And obviously there are rules and regulations about how to use drugs. But when it comes to certain nutrients and nutrient complexes, you can keep on until you see your results, because shall we say, the safety profile is so wide. So that's what I'm always looking for things, nutrients that the body recognizes, that are natural to the body, that the body can use and have a very high safety profile. You don't have to be worried about overdose, like I said. So that's our approach, and it's called the Building Strength approach. And we started way back in 2007 when we were doing the webinars. We called our company the Building Strength LLC, because that was the philosophy behind it. And that applies to everything, whether it's cancer, sickle cell disease, whether it's dementia, whether it's a blood condition. If you focus on strengthening or nourishing the part of the body that is affected, you will find out that the body in turn will begin to some degree, I'm not saying don't go crazy on me, I'm not saying it's going to treat or reverse everything, but to some degree, the body can fix its own problems, provided it is given the tools and the environment that it needs. So this is kind of like what we do when it comes to, shall we say, regaining your marbles. This is the BBF, means the Brain and Body Foundation approach. So first and foremost, we want to start by preventing. You got to prevent it. People, as I said at the beginning of the talk, we need to understand what it takes to prevent, not just prevent now, but to nourish our brains. Even if you have no problems at all, it doesn't mean that next year you might not have a problem. You need to, and I say starting from the age of 30, it seems like from 30 to 40, things plateau out, but 40 is when things tend to go south, in my opinion. So from 30 to 40, at 30, you've reached pretty much you've reached the height of your physical potential, mentally, physically, and all that. A lot of what happens afterwards will depend on your lifestyle. So what are the things that will help to protect and strengthen your brain? I love this quote: "Make men large and strong, and tyranny will bankrupt itself in making shackles for it." This was by Henry Ward Beecher. Gandhi knew this. I guess Martin Luther King knew this, and every other person who has been a social freedom fighter. They understand that if you educate people, if you strengthen people, if you tell them what people, educate them on what their rights are, the rights and privileges are, they in turn will be able to stand up for themselves. Same thing applies, and I like to use this with kids as well. If you start raising kids right in moral principles and knowing how to in money, how to save, how to earn the money, how to work hard, those basic principles that are good for long-term success, if you educate them at an early age, they are less likely to fall into vices or into problems or go to jail if you've educated them well from the start. The same principle applies to the brain, and you can start at any time. Start strengthening the brain, you're going to get some results. And so some of the things, the most basic things that we recommend, again, I always think in terms of what for people in remote areas, and really this applies across the board because everybody is a human being, everybody has a brain. What are the most basic things your brain needs? Vitamin D, vitamin B. Some people said it should be called brain, for B stands for brain vitamin, because it plays such a huge role in brain development and brain protection. I talk about fiber a lot in my talks. Vitamin C is very important, not just for as a good collagen support, but vitamin C is so important for even the production of serotonin, for instance. It's also important as an antioxidant, as an anti-inflammatory. Zinc, some people say, is the most important mineral for the immune system and for the brain as well. And magnesium, pretty much every chemical reaction, most chemical reactions need magnesium. So I'm not going to go into details about each of them, but I do want to say a little bit about vitamin D3. You remember earlier on, we talked about Black people having the worst when it comes to cancer and heart disease and obviously dementia, twice as many. It's twice as bad it's twice as diagnosed in Black people than white people. One of the things that researchers are beginning to look at as a reason for that is the fact that Black people tend to have less vitamin D3, especially Black people who live in the Western world, where you have the 4 seasons, as opposed to in tropical Africa, where you have only 2. Tropical, and the sun is out throughout the year. Once a Black person moves to another country, hi there.
Hello.
Come right in. You here for the lecture?
No, I'm actually here to set up for a repast.
All right, so let's talk about vitamin D and the brain. If you remember, I talked about how in the earlier part of this lecture, we talked about how Black people tend to have it worse, like twice as much Alzheimer's disease. Same thing is really bad with prostate cancer, breast cancer, and cardiovascular disease, and a lot of other conditions. One of the things researchers are beginning to point to as a culprit is the low levels of vitamin D. Obviously, it's not just one thing, but it seems like a lot can be done if you make sure people's vitamin D levels are adequate. I mean, vitamin D, we're trained that vitamin D is just for the bones and helps in bone calcium metabolism, and that's it. But we now know that vitamin D does so much more. It helps with brain formation, brain protection, brain function. It helps with hormones, it helps with cardiovascular health, it helps immune health, it helps with pretty much everything that the body has to deal with. So over 10% of the genes are regulated by vitamin D. So if we're going to help protect and keep a healthy brain, oh, by the way, yes, COVID-19, everybody's heard about vitamin D with COVID-19. It's probably the one factor, probably in my opinion, more than anything else, is the low vitamin D levels have been associated with severe, moderate to severe COVID-19 cases. So you've got to make the vitamin D good. And I put this picture in front of you because I wanted to show you what happens. One of the things they tested to see how important vitamin D is. They had two pups from the same litter, same mother, same age. After one had his ability to produce or make vitamin D knocked out of it genetically, the other one was normal. After about 3 to, I believe, 5 months, you can see the one on the left, the one on the bottom, and the one on the left. I guess that'll be the one on the right, excuse me. The one on the right, you can see looks old and shriveled and weak. The one on the left looks healthy. And the one on the right, obviously, is the one that had vitamin D knocked out of it. So vitamin D is crucial for everything, absolutely everything. So you really want to ensure that your vitamin D levels are normal to high. I mean, throughout the pandemic, I traveled everywhere, and I was in every circumstance, everywhere I went, I was just ensuring that I took a good amount of vitamin D. All right, another thing you want to mention, and I'm just talking about the basics now. If you can get a good high quality omega-3 fatty acids supplements, I would strongly urge you to get it. If you think about it, 60% of your body, your brain's weight is fat. And over half of that fat is specifically omega-3s. So it doesn't make sense if you don't supplement enough, if you don't have enough omega-3s. And most of us don't get enough omega-3s. We get a lot of omega-6s. We don't get enough omega-3s. So omega-3s can help to supplement and help to strengthen your brain, help in terms of the structure and in fact, repair of the brain cells. All right, I just wanted to mention this aspect too. It's one thing to know what supplements to use, it's another thing to know how to use them, especially when you're faced with circumstances. What I mean by that, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So we all know sleep is important. We know stress is important. Stress can damage your memory centers in the brain. Prolonged stress can. If you don't sleep well enough, your body tends not to be able to repair the brain. Your brain doesn't get rid of toxins like it should. So the white on rice, I learned this from a friend, the white on rice mentality is like a soccer mom. I think that's what comes to mind. A picture of a soccer mom who is on top of things. And if you mess with any of her kids, you know you're in trouble. I mean, like you coach, you scream, you say the wrong word to a kid, she's going to get all over you. Maybe that's not the best example. I'm just thinking what the white on rice mentality is as soon as you see a problem, you jump on top of it. So I'll give you an example. When I first came to the US, there was no vaccine, and I had to do a lot of work, so I was traveling all over the place. Anytime I was with a group of people and it was very crowded, sometimes some wore masks, others did not. As soon as I got home, I would go take like 4 or 5 pills of vitamin D. Or if I didn't sleep well or I felt stressed, I'll take immune support, I'll take vitamins and all that. Things that you want to do right there and then. You don't want to wait until the next day or the next week. Don't say because you've taken your dose of vitamin D or your dose of vitamin C for the day, that's it. If you are in a circumstance, again, if you're stressed, if you didn't sleep well, if you're smoking, or if your doctor, for instance, prescribes statins, we now know that statins can have an adverse effect. Statins help reduce cholesterol, but they also take out vital nutrients from your body, including a nutrient called CoQ10, which is extremely important for energy formation in the brain and in the muscles. If your doctor prescribes statins, you want it as soon as possible, even if he does not recommend it, as soon as possible, you want to get CoQ10 supplements so you can supplement whatever he's doing, because I guarantee you, if you're on a statin, your body is being depleted of that vital nutrient called CoQ10. So that's the philosophy I want to pass across. You want to be on top of things. You want to ensure that you're getting on top of things. These are the important things. And we provide this information on our website, brainandbodyfoundation.org, so you can get to know a lot more about these things. But I guarantee you there are circumstances that you are possibly passing by or passing through, and you're not protecting yourself adequately as you're going through circumstances. And that may come back and bite, hopefully not, some of you. So it's important that you stay on top of things. Okay, so what happens if you now begin to have the signs of brain deterioration? You're losing your memory, you can't find your way back home, you're not paying your bills on time, or you're miscalculating, or you're getting confused for no reason at all, or you can't find the right words anymore, you can't remember who your spouse is or what his or her name is. Those are signs that are beginning to show up, and unfortunately it's happening at an earlier and earlier age. 65 years was the average age it started before. We're now seeing individuals in their 40s and 50s beginning to have what is known as early onset Alzheimer's disease. What can be done if you get to that point? Does anybody know what happens next? Do you?
He turns green, he gets very muscular.
He turns green and gets very muscular. Absolutely. Good answer. I was concerned somebody would not know it. So I grew up watching the real Bruce Banner, the series, The Incredible Hulk. And we all know what happens. Once you get him upset, that's why he says, don't get me angry. He's a mild-mannered man. Don't get me angry. If you get me angry, you won't like me when I'm angry. So once his eyes turn green, all bets are off. It's kind of like a kid. You're a nanny, and then you do something, and the baby gets upset. And you know how they act, like, it's like they're about to do that, let out that big scream, and you want to do everything you can to stop him or her from letting out that big scream, because once he does so, all bets are off. Once he starts that first one. So when he still has that facial expression that he's thinking about crying, you want to stop him before he does that. Sometimes you can succeed, other times you don't. Bottom line, all what we've been talking about, the vitamin C, the vitamin D, the B vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids, those are all the things that you need to do to protect and to nourish your brain. If they start, your parents, your loved ones starts to manifest these things, those things are not going to be enough. You're going to have to really, really bring in the big guns. And so we're going to end this last aspect of the seminar talking about the big guns. What is really going to take to really make a dent when it comes to an individual, a client, a patient with Alzheimer's disease. So I'm going to take some time to just talk about that a little bit. You cannot treat a brain condition without treating the rest of the body. It's just not going to work, because the brain is affected by the body, and the body in turn is affected by the brain. That's one thing we've learned. But what parts of the body, what systems in the body? The three systems, the body has about 12 or 13 systems: the musculoskeletal system, the nervous system, so on and so forth. There are three systems that control all the rest. These are the brains, that's the purple parts, hypothalamus. The brain, the endocrine system, which controls your hormones, your immune system. So these three systems control all the rest. if you're going to address brain conditions, you're gonna have to get these three systems right. In other words, you're gonna have to find what it takes to recharge, to nourish, and to strengthen these systems. Let's start with the brain. There's a whole lot of new super, I guess you would call them super supplements or super nutrients that again have a nice, very wide safety margin, but will make a huge difference because the brain uses it to repair and to restore and to re-regulate itself. Amongst the things that we found out that are absolutely fantastic are omega-3 fatty acids. Now, I always have to say this, 95% of what you see on the shelves in health food stores will not do what I'm talking about. But there are some companies that are exclusively focused on producing the best kinds of omega-3s. And so we work with one of those companies, and that's what we use. Next thing is the endocrine system. I mentioned that estrogen is very protective of the brain. Well, there are other hormones too that are important. Your thyroid hormone, testosterone, insulin, obviously, super important for regulation of the brain. These must be regulated, and there are nutrient complexes. Sometimes one supplement can help in regulating the hormones. We use that as well. You've got to strengthen the immune system. I don't know if you know this, but it's just 10% of your brain cells that are actually neurons. Only 10% of the whole mass of your brain are neurons. A good over 10% are actually immune cells in the brain, and there are other kinds of support cells as well. So the neurons are important. Obviously, that's where the action happens. But all these other support cells, to me, that's good news because the neurons are so complicated and so difficult to treat. But if you can also, by proxy, heal and address the other cells, they in turn can help support and nourish the brain cells as well. So we give a supplement that helps with the immune system as well. And I like to put this quote here. The human body heals itself, and proper nutrition provides it with the resources that it requires to accomplish that task. The human body heals itself. Your body is always being damaged. Your brain is always being damaged, especially when you pass 50. The damage gets even worse, whether you feel it or not. But if you provide your body with the right nutrients, the right nutrition, it's going to help to repair that damage as it's happening. And the higher quality nutrients you give your body, the better that repair shall be. And why do I say this? There are two systems that help to bring those nutrients to your brain cells. Obviously, the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system, or the circulatory system, is what takes blood from the heart to your brain, right? It also takes oxygen to the brain. It also takes nutrients that the brain needs to the brain. If you think about this ratio, 2, 20, 25, your brain is 2% of your body's weight or mass. It requires 20% of the body's oxygen supply. It requires 20% of the entire body's oxygen supply, and then 25% of the body, it uses up 25% of the body's energy. So the circulatory system is what takes the oxygen, the nutrients, and everything the brain needs to it. So you need to also have a supplement or something that improves blood flow. Obviously, if you exercise more, you're improving blood flow. But on top of that, especially if you have a person who is suffering from Alzheimer's disease, they may not be able to move anywhere. So you need a nutrient or supplement that can help to improve that blood flow. And we deal a lot with that in separate talks. And especially when I'm counseling with my patients, we go through all this. And of course, before the nutrients get into the blood, they get into the digestive system. Your mouth has to eat them and it has to chew them. And so your mouth and your body digestive system has to digest and process those foods and take out the ones that are beneficial, leaving the ones that are not beneficial. For your digestive system to do this, it has to be healthy and functional. Most times, when you have a patient with Alzheimer's disease, almost with very few exceptions, they have constipation, They're not digesting their food well. Food is getting stuck there. And once things get stuck, you're talking about a lot of toxicity in the body. So you want to have some, in fact, I recommend that people who have Alzheimer's disease, they go to get a colonic done to help to clear their gut, because there's going to be a lot of impacted feces in the guts that is just being stuck there. And what we're beginning to find out is that Alzheimer's disease actually starts in the gut. I know this sounds strange, but we're going to begin to find out that there are actually bugs in the guts, and some in the what is known as the sinuses around the brain, the air sinuses, that begin to trigger the formation of of the amyloid plaques and the tau, the tau tangles, the proteins that we find out that are so symbolic of Alzheimer's disease. They are finding out that these things actually start in the gut. There are certain bugs that trigger the formation of these proteins, and that are so damaging to the brain cells. So bottom line is that it is crucial that if you're taking care of an individual with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, you've got to ensure that his or her digestive system is working properly. Sometimes they might need probiotics. We have some here. Sometimes they may need enzymes. Sometimes, like I said, they may just need to have things pushed out of them by a qualified healthcare professional. But you've got to consider the digestive system. And I think this is, unfortunately, too much of the time, it's overlooked. And yet that might be the key in certain cases. I remember when I started doing webinars, there was one of our viewers or our participants, she said that her father had Alzheimer's disease. They decided for some reason to take them to the colonic, to take them to the spa, have them do a colonic. And this is a man who didn't recognize anybody. He was out of it. And they said after that colonic for about 2 weeks, their father was completely lucid, was back to normal. And I was like, really? But what happened? After 2 weeks, he deteriorated and went back and reverted to what is the original situation. I don't know all the situation, everything about that situation, but I can tell you this. They did not follow up. If they had not only done the colonic, but they had put in the right probiotics, they had put in the right nutrients, they would have been able to at least keep or retain some of the benefits that they saw. So that's a very important thing. So there you have it. You have about 6 issues, 6 areas you want to talk about. And I mentioned in the 6th part is detoxification. You've got to detoxify. And there are certain nutrients, there are certain nutraceuticals that help to extract and remove toxins from the brain in a safe way. Remember, the key is always to have it safe. Everything that we're going to be doing, everything that we recommend, we've used extensively with kids. And they've been safe. They've been, I mean, I hate to use the word 100. I don't say, I can't say 100% because that will not be true, because we don't really get any feedback to any negative feedback about it. But again, I can't say 100%. Nobody can guarantee 100%. But for the most part, they've been very, they've worked with kids. The Ministry of Health in Nigeria has validated, they've approved everything that we're using. So it's important that you consider using and consider this approach to help to nourish your brain and to keep your brain healthy. I don't want to end this without talking about toxins in our atmosphere. I kind of alluded to it a couple of times, but we're living in a more and more toxic world. Everything around us, from what we eat to what we drink to what the air we breathe in, COVID-19, for example, even what we put on our skins. And of course, that includes makeup as well, deodorant and everything else. These things all can potentially cause problems for us. So it's important we know what it takes to protect ourselves from these things. And what more important, how to continually remove these things from our bodies so that they don't accumulate. Andrew, we do a Wednesday webinar every Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about toxins, so this very topic. So we're going to talk about these toxins, how they affect the brain, and what you can do. Some of the tools out there they can use to remove these toxins from the brain. Remember, the thing is about, we're not treating a disease as much as we are strengthening the body. Make men large and strong, make your cells strong, make your brain cells strong, and you will see some really good results. A balanced diet is not going to do it. Many times we look at balanced diets, and even if you get a really balanced diet, you have to consider there might be pesticides, there might be fertilizer, you might not have all the nutrients that you used to have in those foods 20 years ago. You might not have them to the right amounts these days. So you've got to deal with potent supplements, nutraceuticals and supplement complex. We also have a product here. I searched for a long time for probiotics. I don't know if any of you know about probiotics. Probiotics are like good bacteria. They regulate brain function. They help to protect against invaders. They do all kinds of great things. I have another talk on that entirely. But probiotics are so important. It took us years to find the right kind of probiotics. Once we started using it on kids with Down syndrome, kids with autism, we began to see significant improvements. So this is a safe one to consider. Is Alzheimer's really that irresistible force that cannot be stayed, can't be stopped, can't be slowed down? According to medical science, maybe it is. But if you're looking at the human potential, how the body and the human spirit work, maybe not as much. There's always going to be something you can do about it. So I encourage you to keep on searching. Don't lose hope. There is always an answer. So with that, I want to say thank you for listening, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thank you.